For the first time on Blu-ray, discover the film that Fangoria magazine called dark, clever, and nasty as hell.
Everybody is expendable for the good of the film. Everybody.
And Dread Central said was disturbing, merciless horror, the way it should be.
I mean, that's real blood you're looking at there.
The Hills Run Red. Loaded with 6.5 hours of never-before-seen bonus features, destined to make you lose your mind. Including 3 commentary tracks, 10 featurettes from the set with interviews from the cast and crew.
When I read it, it kind of made me feel a bit sick, so you know it's gonna go down well with the horror fans.
Right now I'm tied to a wheelchair, and it's Friday night, which is an average Friday night for me.
Our little lurid, nasty, rude, rock and roll, bloody, disgusting horror film. There's no way it's going to be a Dark Castle movie. 3 retrospective featurettes.
You can't write a movie like The Hills Run Red without having, by being completely ignorant of what the genre's like. And there's a huge slasher element in it.
When I got the original script, I was surprised. I was shocked.
When you see something that shocks you this much right off the bat, your creative wheels are immediately starting to spin.
Proof of concept animatic and trailer. The original making of documentary. The original trailer and reversible cover art. Available June 16th, 2020. Only from Scream Factory.
Well, greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, your Viceroy of Verisimilitude, your Sommelier of Cinema, your Archbishop of Banterbury, and of course, as we all know, your existential Mr. Rogers, Robert Meyer Burnett, and I am coming to you, Robcasting at you imagination connoisseurs, you members of this, the Post-Geek Singularity community. This is Robservations, the show about something, episode 405. It is a Sunday, May 3rd, the day before some corporate co-opted day that we all know as May the 4th be with you. I understand some idiot came up with that idea because, 4th sounds like force. Star Wars Day is, was, and always will be May 25th. And for those true believers who are real Star Wars fans, you understand why that is. Even Disney was trying to co-opt your tweets and saying, we can use what you hashtag May the 4th be with you as part of our whatever. Like, give me a break. Give me a break. Let's take back May 25th and let's make May 25th Star Wars Day, ladies and gentlemen, because that's the way it should be. Anyway, first of all, before I begin, I would like to give some shout-outs to some people. I was told that Mecha Random, who I have been on shows with on Midnight's Edge, called out the Post-Geek Singularity and said that it was the kind of... She was wondering what is the name for the current state of fandom, and she actually said that the Post-Geek Singularity was a great name and gave me full credit for that. So I want to throw some love Mecha Random's way and say thank you so much for recognizing the name, recognizing the community. And you know, it made me think about something. The name Post-Geek Singularity, which, by the way, I will take full credit. I made it up. I absolutely did. It was something I made up. It was inspired by Ray Kurzweil's book, The Coming Singularity. I don't know if Ray Kurzweil came up with the idea of the singularity. Maybe he did not. I don't remember. But I will take credit for coming up with the Post-Geek Singularity. But let me just say, for the record, that when I heard that Mecha Random said this, I was thinking to myself, you know what? How cool was it that she mentioned that? And I just want everyone to know, the idea of the Post-Geek Singularity, while it originated on this channel, it is open source. The name, the Post-Geek Singularity, is an open source name. However, I would ask that people respect, if you would like to call yourselves part of the Post-Geek Singularity on your own channel or the work that you do, that you respect what I, as the founding member of the Post-Geek Singularity, did, and I'm going to post the 3 laws of the Post-Geek Singularity tomorrow on this show. And I will be referencing the 3 laws of robotics as laid down by Isaac Asimov. And the Post-Geek Singularity should be forevermore defined by the rules that I lay down. And now, again, these rules are, they're a suggestion, but I would say if you're going to take my name, the name that I came up with, I would ask you to respect not only your fellow fans and members of the Post-Geek Singularity, but the ideas that I lay down, having been the originator of it. But I want to say thank you to Mecha Random for pointing that out. That was very nice of you. Very nice shout out on your channel. You didn't have to do that. But what it reminds me of, everyone, is whether you agree with certain YouTubers or not. Remember, at our baseline, we are all fans. We are all in this together, and we all do this because we love it. We love Star Wars. We love Star Trek. We love DC and Marvel Comics. We love The Last of Us. We love our video games. We love all of the things that the Post-Geek Singularity loves. And we all just want it to be great. I also want to call out, I put it in the top of this live chat, Retro Blasting, another great YouTube channel that I've enjoyed for a long time. Retro Blasting has a great video that actually I watched this morning that they posted yesterday about corporate minders and the corporate owners of the franchises that we love. And it really inspired, I watched that video, I'm like, that's what I want to talk about today. Because with less and less daily entertainment news dropping, I have found it's pretty awesome to find, other YouTubers might inspire me to talk about something. But, of course, as I am wont to do after watching Retro Blasting's interesting and well-done video, which, again, link is at the top of the live chat today, so you can go there. I highly recommend checking that video out. Also, for, since I'm talking about YouTubers I like, Analog Toys, another great YouTube channel. Genic, if you want to watch a man just the Rembrandt of airbrushing, check out Genic. Oh my God, boy, do I love that. And of course, Justin's Collection. If you want to know everything Hot Toys, Justin's Collection is another place to go and check that out as well. Those are channels that I go to a lot. Well, anyway, I should bring up before I get into this that I appeared in a book, which actually fell off my shelf and it's not mint anymore. It bothers me. It's an academic book by Lucy Bennett and Paul Booth. And they contacted me a couple of years back, like 3 years back, to appear. They interviewed me for this really interesting book called Seeing Fans. Now, this is an academic book, so it's expensive. I think it's out here. Here's the cover. Representations of Fandom in Media and Popular Culture. It's a really interesting examination of fandom. They interviewed me because of Free Enterprise. It's a short interview, but there's some really interesting articles here that cover many areas of fandom, including sports, Doctor Who fandom, Star Trek, Star Wars, all kinds of fandom. Check it out. I strongly suggest reading it. It's a really worthy tome. So, anyway, after watching Retro Blasting's book, it got me thinking about fandom and corporate minders and the fact that our biggest fandoms are now defined by larger and larger corporations. And before, corporations themselves, sure, everybody was working for those corporations, but still there was creative leeway. The corporations would buy Star Trek, but it was still up to Roddenberry and then in the Rick Berman era to provide Star Trek. There was, as Rick Berman will tell you in our Star Trek documentaries, there was very little interference. It was a well-run machine. They were delivering product that everybody was happy with, so they were basically left alone. I don't know how much Kevin Feige has to deal with, but I would say that the MCU under his stewardship, and I might say that in all of Hollywood history, if somebody said that Kevin Feige was the greatest producer of all time, I wouldn't argue. Sure, did he produce Gone with the Wind? Is he David O. Selznick? I don't know, because his scope has been limited to the MCU, but if you break it down, $1 billion a film, if you average it out, I would say Kevin Feige is the most successful producer in Hollywood history. An argument could be made from a monetary standpoint and a creative one, in the sense that what he has tried to do, he succeeded in doing. And that's unique. And that is worth celebrating. And I'm a big fan of the MCU, and I like what he's... again, I'm all about authorship and the synergy that Kevin Feige has fostered between filmmakers and interests of the studio. Now, I don't know as far as how Marvel deals with Disney, their corporate overlords, but it seems to me that there's a bit of a hands-off policy, and because it's working. And those movies are not breaking the bank. Of course, Infinity War and Endgame were something else entirely, but the individual movies, they've, I'm sure, kept to a certain formula, so they're not breaking the bank. So it's pretty amazing. But anyway, that said, I wanted to deal with a few articles I found. The first one is from Gizmodo by Catherine Trendacosta, and this article was written in 2019. And you'll forgive me, once again, I have to don the glasses because I'm an old man with one foot in the grave. In the last 20 years, fandom and mass culture have basically merged. Fans and fandom spent the 2000s fighting for legitimacy and proving their combined worth. And corporations, well, they spent the 2010s learning how to co-opt fandom to silence critics, manipulate press, and make even more money. For decades and decades, fandom wasn't something you talked about. Not really. Fanfic, fan art, and cosplay, these were things shared at conventions and in zines and later in Usenet groups. Even the outwardly facing form of fandom, the manboy fan with his collectibles and endless trivia debates, I don't know anyone like that, Catherine, what are you talking about? Was usually presented as something to be ashamed of. By the early 2000s, the age of the geek was clearly ascendant. Those were the years in which fandom got mainstream acceptance, even if the discussions about Twilight were marked by the classic derision given to things beloved by young women. In 2008, it also A, proved the power of fan conventions, and B, gave a lot of people their first understanding of shipping and shipping wars. I can see Vesna and Willow getting all a Twitter. And C, was talked about in a way that showed mainstream writers had some understanding of fandom culture. Today, almost everyone knows what fanfic, shipping, and canon are. But with the spotlight has come money, corporations, and control. If the early 2000s were about gaining acceptance, then the 2010s have been about getting paid. Fandom isn't monolithic. Specifically, fandom has often been characterized as being split between curatorial, also called curative, and transformative fandom. The former is characterized by activities like memorizing trivia and or buying collectibles. By its very nature, it's consumptive. And while that stereotype of the fanboy with his mint condition and action figures still in the box was derided, being this kind of fan didn't get you in trouble with corporations. Transformative fandom's road was much rockier. The split between curatorial and transformative fandom, with one more accepted than the other, has been historically viewed as gendered. Transformative fandom is where fans don't just consume the media, they make it their own. This is where you get cosplay, fan films, and so on. I know nothing about that. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Transformative fandom got you into trouble. Being threatened with legal action for writing fanfic was a very real danger. I'd argue that transformative fandom calls to marginalized groups in general, because it is the realm of people who see something compelling in a piece of media and then reinterpret it in a new way to make it easier to identify with. Hollywood and comics and book writers and so on has been so white, so straight, and so male for so long. Transformative fandom lets people participate in mainstream culture and still get to see themselves in it. Now, let me just say right here, Catherine, let me just editorialize if I may. Fandom was white, straight, and male for a long time, predominantly. I met lots of people over the last 40 years that I was deeply immersed in fandom of all kinds. But I would say you were correct in saying that. So anyone who wants to get triggered, I wanted to see more diversity in fandom. I just didn't see it. I used to get into arguments with Amy Dallin about this. Yes, there were always women in fandom, but there was definitely a larger group of men than women. Although I will say that the largest group of females in fandom usually were at literary skewing conventions like the World Cons and things like that. Things that were science fiction fans, the fandom that was defined by literature first, because there was more women involved in that than other kinds of fandom. And I think one of the great things about the last 30 years of fandom since I've been going to Comic-Con is not just all kinds of people, whether it's women, whether it's LGBTQ, also it's people of all different ages. I love seeing multi-generations of families being involved in fandom. And one of the things about the Post-Geek Singularity is it encompasses everybody, all belief systems, all genders, whatever you identify with. Even if you don't even identify as human, you're one of the aliens of the 28 known galaxies, everyone is welcome as part of the Post-Geek Singularity community. All that we ask is that everybody respects everybody else's right to be here, no matter who you are, what you believe, or let's face it, who you want to fuck. Because it doesn't matter if it's Octurian, as we all know. We're all welcome as long as you respect everyone else's right to be here as well. And remember, those are people who what? Everyone has a story to tell you have yet to hear. All you have to do is listen. One of the things about the Post-Geek Singularity community is, by definition, we want to hear your story. We don't judge, we listen. I want to continue. I'd argue that transformative fandom calls to marginalized groups in general because it is the realm of people who see something compelling in a piece of media and then reinterpret it in a new way to make it easier to identify with. Transformative fandom has been looked down on, derided often for the people who participate in it. Some refer to it using words like girly or gay or just weird. And between the ridicule and the legal threats from studios and authors, transformative fandom has been dismissed and endangered for a very long time. In the last few decades, that's changed just enough that younger fans don't know just how scary it was for those who came before them. All over Tumblr, there are posts of older fans explaining the history of fan communities getting decimated because the corporate owner of whatever platform they were using didn't like something they were doing. Comic books, science fiction, and fantasy aren't just a part of pop culture now, they dominate it. And that means fans of all kinds don't live under the shame they used to. Wearing the clothes, buying the toys, going to the theme park for Star Wars or Marvel movies isn't seen as aberrant for adults anymore. The studios make and market these things for adults as much as kids. Save a few shitty examples, cough, Big Bang Theory, cough. The obsessive fanboy isn't the punching bag it used to be. And thanks to some other sea changes, transformative fandom is also in a safer place than ever before. There is one theme that sticks out in the last 10 years of fandom, and it is ownership. We talk about media as IP, intellectual property. Even though fans have no personal stake in these intellectual properties, they have taken to demanding things from creators because they feel they are owed it. The most successful fan project of all time is called An Archive of Our Own. And once you own something, you can sell it. Fan work by fans for fans. One major force in making fanfic safe to write, share, and consume is Archive of Our Own, AO3, and the group that created and runs it, the Organization for Transformative Works, OTW. AO3 launched in late 2009, and for the first time ever, it won a Hugo Award this year. Remember, this was written in 2019. AO3 is a non-profit. This is vital and unique. We've had fanfic operations that were for-profit before, and they either ended up with restrictions to make them more palatable or were downright predatory. AO3 has no advertisers to make happy, no corporate masters concerned with whether a gay character can sell tickets, and no interest in either censorship or deleting works it doesn't like. In addition to running the archive, ATW does legal work that makes creating fan works much safer than it used to be. Its very existence and fan advocacy is the reason so many new fans don't know how bad the fear was for their predecessors. This is great. AO3 is for fans and by fans. We do own this, and it's wonderful. You see fans as making things for each other throughout the history of fandom, with AO3 as a huge community endeavor. But fan-to-fan exchanges are also changing. Transformative fandom has a long history of gifting fan works, exchanging art for fanfic, for example. Any number of kink memes where people put out ideas and other people write them. Since 2003, there's been Yuletide, where writers exchange fanfics set in fandoms that aren't terribly popular. And there has also been fan work drives for charity. In the same way, people these days use things like GoFundMe to raise money for basic necessities, fan work creators have started taking commissions for their work. This is another expression of the hellscape of 2019, where people can't afford rent, food, or healthcare and are mobilizing their skills and their communities to survive. This is depressing but understandable. There is also the rise of sites Redbubble, founded in 2006, and Etsy, founded in 2006, where fans can sell their work to other fans. Where selling any of this thing in any sort of public forum used to be terrifying, it's now fairly normal. There are legal concerns, of course. It's just that these days, between the work of groups like OTW and the Electronic Frontier Foundations, which, full disclosure, I work at, there's more understanding and legal precedent showing that fan works are transformative and not copyright infringement. Creators and companies also have figured out that this kind of fan creation is the result of love for their show, movie, etc., and that going after fans in the way Anne Rice was famous for can only serve to alienate your base. This kind of stuff is small scale. It's niche, and it is a way for fans to get things to other fans that gives them what official merchandise won't, or is behind on making. See Baby Yoda. It builds on the classic notion of transformative fandom. We will give you what canon will not. We see you. You are not alone. So it's safer now, and companies recognize how important this kind of stuff is to their fans. But then the question for the megacorporation is, as it always is, how can we get a piece of this? Fandom is big business these days, and while making money off curatorial fandom and suppressing transformational fandom was the norm for big companies for years, that's also changed. And by giving some transformational fandom its blessing and taking some of the profits, corporations have also been able to exert a more subtle form of control over fandom than the legal threats of years ago. Merchandising had been a pretty simple game for a long time. The poster, the shirt of the poster, action figures that faithfully replicate the movie, and so on. But now companies give licenses to more experimental artists and companies. You see this with Mondo, the TV and movie t-shirt and art brand, which may have launched in 2004, but grew big enough to have its own convention in 2014. Mondo spent a year getting Lucasfilm to give it a license for Star Wars, one of the biggest merchandising properties there is, releasing exclusives in 2010. While projects like this are a limited run, it's still a larger scale than much of the fan-to-fan interactions detailed above. And the press they get, which fan works without licensees don't often receive unless they go viral, gives them more influence in the world of fandom. Her Universe, home of a mass-produced geek high-fashion label, started in 2010 and is a big presence at Fan Mecca, San Diego Comic-Con. Her Universe was started by Ashley Eckstein, the voice of Ahsoka Tano in Star Wars The Clone Wars, specifically because she couldn't find enough merchandise for women fans. That's a classic transformative fandom motivation. Her Universe was bought by Hot Topic in 2016. None of these things are bad per se. More variety, more easily available merchandise is a boon to fans. What it also means is that brands are adopting fan works into their marketing and profit plans, and that means that some fan works have the approval of the creators and some don't. And the work given approval is unlikely to be the kind that challenges gender, race, or sexuality in the same way that transformative fandom usually does. In essence, in the last decade or so, corporations have co-opted the most palatable transformative fandom and monetized it. Boss Logic, the internet name of Code Abdo, became famous online for his photo manipulations, taking the practice of fan casting, that is, fans talking about who should play their favorite characters in live-action adaptations, to another level. His fan art was so popular and shared so much of it got the attention of the Russo brothers and Disney, eventually getting him work making official posters for the company. By the way, it was a thrill last weekend to be on, albeit briefly, on a part of the Mainframe Comic-Con with Boss Logic, because I love that dude. Social media in general has been a place, by the way, I hope it's Code Abdo. I don't know if I pronounced that correctly, so I apologize. Social media in general has been a place where fan artists can get recognition from the writers, directors, or actors that inspired their work. Michael Sheen's been a one-man retweeting machine in a way that's wonderfully positive. On the other hand, having your work go viral can also go wrong for fan artists. There's also the slightly gross habit of major releases having contests for fans to design posters rather than hiring them as the artists the way they do for the rest of their marketing material. They get a lot of free posters to share and trade on the desire of fans to be part of the thing they love for it. It can mean anything from an influx of orders the small creators can't meet to abuse. While interactions like Sheen's are positive, retweets from brand accounts are a little different, in that companies pick and choose only the fan art that fits their existing marketing. This is happening outside of FanWorks and other parts of fan communities. San Diego Comic-Con moved from being just a big deal for fans and into a big deal period in 2008. The year before, a movie from a brand new studio showed its first footage at San Diego Comic-Con. It was the first Iron Man. Iron Man did incredibly well in 2008, signaling both the start of the geek takeover of pop culture, making a star out of a character not as well known to the general public as Batman, and of San Diego Comic-Con as an important marketing stage for Hollywood's biggest names. San Diego Comic-Con's profile jumped again in 2008 with the absolute mania at the first Twilight panel. That was when the lines and fervor that we now associate as par for the course for Hall H at San Diego Comic-Con started. And so, these kinds of fan conventions, which used to be fan-run and spent years small and growing into annual traditions, have themselves become targets for for-profit businesses. While San Diego Comic-Con is still run by a nonprofit that does nothing but handle San Diego Comic-Con conventions like NYCC, C2E2, Star Wars Celebration, and many more are run by Reed Pop, a subsidiary of event organizer Reed Exhibitions, and they just keep buying up conventions, pulling more and more shows under one big corporate roof. Corporations have identified the monetizable parts of both curatorial and transformational fandom and made them all consumptive fandom. Fans are encouraged to want what's been approved by the creator and to back up that approval by buying more and more. So fandom can be bought and sold. Everyone owns a piece. And with that has come entitlement. On the side of fans, the need for curators to bless one fan theory over another, of claiming victory if a story ends up playing out the way they want, has led to some appalling behavior. While ugly fan wars have always been a thing, it's the public, large-scale harassment of actors, writers, and other fans that's new. It's Kelly Marie Tran being bullied off Instagram, fan harassment of Steven Universe artists, and of a Steven Universe artist, and threatening people over spoilers. It's the repeated bad faith arguments about why AO3, birthed in the wake of a history mass deletions and bannings of fan communities and works, which defends that community in every conceivable way, doesn't ban certain content. It's the endless mewling cries for the Snyder Cut of Justice League, the strongest argument outside of the U.S. military issuing a warning about Joker that some sections of online fandom are indistinguishable from truther subreddits there is. Now, again, I would like to step in and say, I would like to see the Snyder Cut of Justice League. Zack Snyder was making the Justice League movie. It was the third of his films that he began with Man of Steel and Batman v Superman. Now, I have gone on record as saying I adore Man of Steel, especially as a science fiction first contact story. I also think that the ultimate version of Batman v Superman has a lot of merit. It's overstuffed and there's a lot of weird goofiness in it, but there's a feeling there. There is authorship. There's a unique vision that I like. And Justice League, I feel, was, unfortunately, what happened to it, and it's been well documented, was a damn shame. And I think the idea, yes, Zack Snyder had a personal tragedy in his life, and that was terrible. and I understand people are locked into release dates because we're talking hundreds of millions of dollars at stake, but all of the choices that were made with Justice League were bad reactionary choices, and I honestly believe that if we were allowed to see Zack Snyder's ultimate vision for what that movie was supposed to be, it would be better than what we got, which by any metric was compromised. So, why do we want to see the Snyder Cut? Because we think it would be better. I've wanted to see a Justice League movie my whole life. The Justice League movie that we got, the movie opens with bad CGI where Henry Cavill's face is altered, and I can't get past the opening scene. How that was even allowed to open a movie from a major studio, I'll never know. It's compromised from the get-go, and I fucking hate it. So I would love to see the Snyder Cut. But you know what? I understand the realities of what studios are dealing with. It would cost tens of millions of dollars to produce that. Where's that money going to come from? And remember, it's not just the money to make the Snyder Cut. You have to times it by 3 to make it profitable. So let's say they spend $30 million. That means it's going to be $90 million before it even gets to bottom line, before it breaks even. Where's the $90 million going to come from? Can they release it in theaters? Is there any guarantee it'll make that money back? The reality is the reason there might not ever be a Snyder Cut is one of money. Studios are not in the business, nor is any business in the business of charity. You have to make money. People have to get paid. Anyway. And of course, it's Zack Snyder encouraging the Snyder Cut fans, letting the adulation lead him to give one group of fans approval and therefore a way to win over other fans. It's one of the official endgame hashtags, with a fun exclusive emoji being hashtag don't spoil the endgame. It's Endgame's directors of the movie posting a letter pleading for the same thing in a way that explicitly named specific fandom activities and then basically claimed that being a real fan involved not talking about it. It's Harry Potter and the Cursed Child's Keep the Secrets hashtag, and again portraying some fans as traitors. The one reading, Don't be a wormtail, hashtag don't be a wormtail. It's the whole Spider-Man debacle, getting a hashtag that framed it not as two giant companies fighting over IP rights, but as a fight of real fans against Sony. When maybe the real question for fans should be, why is Disney entitled to own so much of our culture wholesale? Maybe Sony and Disney and whomever should get to make Spider-Man movies, and then we'd pay for the best one, and not just the only one. As companies and creators have incorporated fandom more and more into their official marketing, they've exerted more and more influence and control over it. As we end 2019 and go into 2020, we do so after a decade of fandom going corporate, of fans seeking approval and creators giving it, of movies using fan tweets and commercials when the reviews are bad, of fans lording that over other fans, and of debates about being a good fan centering on unqualified support for a piece of media. It's good to not have to be afraid to be a fan. It's nice to not be ashamed of fan fiction. It's truly beautiful that AOC won a Hugo in 2019. It's a shame that fandom has been co-opted by brands. It's a shame that wider acceptance of transformative fandom has let companies pick and choose, giving only a little to the marginalized groups who thrive there. It's a shame that the best parts of transformative fandom are being co-opted by the worst people in fandom. It's a shame that the worst impulses of fandom seem to have the loudest voice. The line doesn't seem to be between curatorial and transformative fandom anymore. The last 10 years have merged both into exercises in consumptive fandom. The new world of fandom is the difference between whether your fandom is for other fans or for the creators and corporations. In other words, instead of the dividing line being what you consume, it's now about who you are paying. Are you supporting fellow fans or the mega corporation? Fandom that wants to create communities, that wants to promote the interests of fans, protect their work, help them experience media in the best way possible for them, is on one side. The fandom of nonprofits like AO3 and the sadly dying Tumblr communities. The fandom isn't about winning, but it's about enjoying creativity. Versus the fandom that wants to dictate to you, that has been proved by marketing that it is immune from criticism because real fans just spend money first and debate it later, or never debate it at all, just unthinkingly consuming. The fandom that is valid because Zack Snyder said so. The fandom of huge megacorporations endlessly humping the same IP over and over. We're lucky that the last 10 years hasn't seen fan-to-fan fandom crushed under the heel of corporate fandom. May it live long and prosper. Now, again, I just love searching the internet and finding these kinds of articles. I watched the retro blasting article this morning, or video this morning, which again, I linked to at the top of this page, and it got me thinking about this. Do I totally agree with everything Catherine's saying? I don't. I'm somebody that works, I played a commercial for a movie that I produced that's finally coming out on Blu-ray next month. So I understand. It ain't show friends, buddies. It's show business. We all want to make money. Everybody's got to get paid. Because you know what? Bobby over here got to eat. That's what I got to say. And it's all about that. And also, these things are incredibly expensive to produce. The only reason that things get made is because they are profitable. So there is a push and pull. Great movies are the absolute collision between art and commerce. And there's always that push and that pull. And when corporate minders are getting hundreds of millions of dollars, so Star Wars movies can get made, so Marvel movies that can get made, I mean, they expect a return on their investment. So you're dealing with a very murky area. And one of the things that I love about the Post-Geek Singularity community is because that fandom has gone mainstream, we are getting Umbrella Academies. We are getting Dark Crystal Age of Resistance. Who would have thunk that? We're getting The Boys. We're getting Preacher. We're getting American Gods. Yes, we're getting new Star Trek and Star Wars. It's a very interesting time. We're getting The Last of Us Part 2, or whatever it's called. And we'll see if it's good or not. I wait and see. I wait to play to make that judgment. But what do you guys think? Anyway, on that same note, first of all, allow me to jump in. I do have some letters. Yes, I do, ladies and gentlemen. I have some letters for today, and thank God for you guys. I would call this, as Mike Bodden did, Letters for a Lazy Sunday. So let's see what we got. Christopher McCullough. Christopher McCullough is here and says, Mr. Burnett, the anti-life equation is the mathematical proof of the futility of life. It is the new god Darkseid's ultimate goal to find this proof and therefore prove that, in fact, nihilism is the appropriate response to life. Game theory is a discipline of mathematics that plays a large part in modern economic theory. I am neither an economist nor a mathematician, but one way it's been described to laymen involves a duel. Gunslinger 1 hits his mark 90% of the time, Gunslinger 2, 50%, and Gunslinger 3, 20% of the time. If you're Gunslinger 3, who is your best target? According to game theory, your best target is to fire to miss, i.e. hope that 90 and 50 kill each other, it being in their best interest to shoot each other first. Furthermore, say you're equally a matched marksman hitting your targets 100% of the time. Comrade Kissoff's doomsday scenario. In this scenario, it still behooves you to waste your shot. Your odds of survival go up as your chance to hit goes down. Inaction is the logical choice. Darkseid is. Another popular thought experiment that crops up in a lot of game theory and philosophy is something called the prisoner's dilemma. Two prisoners being interrogated separately are given the following options. Rat out your compatriot and walk free while he suffers. If he rats you out as well, you both go to prison for a long time. If you both keep mum, you spend a short amount of time in prison. And if he is the only one to squeal, you go away for the longest time. What is the most logical choice? Let's change it around a little. Your country is about to suffer from a terrible pandemic. You can institute extensive and expensive measures so the smallest amount of people die over a moderate amount of time. Institute no measures to mitigate the virus so the most amount of people die in the shortest amount of time. Or institute moderate and cheap measures meant to mitigate exposure so a moderate amount of people die over the longest amount of time. We're all living out interesting philosophical dilemma once we submitted our answers to Before the Fact. It's been my experience that all philosophical questions are, in the end, about the fundamental question, what is the value of life? I'm sure our pandemic conundrum is played out a few times in one form or another on Star Trek, and the answer it arrives at, informed by Roddenberry's brand of humanism from the interplay between McCoy's id, Spock's superego, and Kirk's ego, are how I would like our society to operate in the actual. Despite all writers' protests of having to write around interpersonal conflict, I find this as much a part of the promise of our society in the future as any warp coil. What really irks me about Star Trek of late, more than all the anachronisms and action set pieces, Star Trek isn't interested in asking questions. Even something as interesting as to whether or not Picard, remade in a robot body, is the same person as before, or can even claim to be alive, is treated seemingly as an afterthought by a show that used to be consumed by such quandaries. You've made your hot take on this one pretty clear, but the real crime here is that the show wasn't engaging in the debate. God damn, my man. You're absolutely right. Thank you for saying it so eloquently. As superhero comics are fundamentally about the struggle between cynicism and aspiration, any good work of speculative fiction should be helping us with these scenarios, showing us how men and women of reason can work to answer the questions that matter for the progress of our society. Christopher, weighing the needs of the many. Well, Christopher McCulloch, this is why I love the Post-Geek Singularity. On what I thought would be a lazy Sunday afternoon of day drinking, I've suddenly just dove into the deep end of philosophical quandary about all my favorite subjects. Damn, son. Thanks for that. I appreciate it. What a great letter. And what a really interesting day this has suddenly become. This next letter comes from Alex Pollock. Hi, Rob. I'm writing this letter for a chance to win the soundbar and speaker. By the way, if I haven't mentioned it before, we, to celebrate the 400th show of Robservations, are giving away a JBL Bar 9.1, a 10-channel soundbar with Dolby Atmos, an almost $1,000 value. I think it retails for like $995.98. It's not even available to the public. It will be available on May 31st, but we are giving away, thanks to the Harman International, the parent company of JBL, Connie at the Harman International Experiential Engagement Department has made sure that, as a fan of both the John Campea show and this show, she's made sure that Harman International made this available to us to give away. And if you would like to enter the giveaway, there is no purchase necessary. There is a link right down in the description of this very show where you can follow the link and enter. No purchase is necessary, and you can enter as many times as you want. Once again, thanks to Connie and the Experiential Engagement Department of Harman International and JBL. How dope is that? Thank you, Connie. Anyway, Alex, I did not know Alex was going to refer to that. I just thought it was a good time to break in and say how cool it is we're giving that away. Hi, Rob. I'm writing this letter for a chance to win the soundbar and speaker. Since one of the options is to write a letter, I thought I'd talk about The Orville, a show that I've loved since I binged the first season on Hulu a few years back. I have written a letter about this show before, but it was awful. It sounded great in my head, but to me, the finished letter felt and read like I had vomited on the page about how much I loved the show. After I sent it, I was scared to go anywhere near your channel, knowing there was a great possibility you'd read it. But maybe I'll do better this time. I think The Orville is a great example of where Star Trek proper should be aiming. I know to some people might think that sounds awful. I'll explain. When The Orville first came out, it was marketed as almost Family Guy meets Star Trek. It makes sense. It's written, produced, and acted by Seth MacFarlane, and a sensible person would assume, based on those credits, that it's a light comedy that makes fun of Star Trek. A lot of people still believe that's the kind of show it is, even though I will say that last season's marketing was more in line with the show it really is. Star Trek with more comedy. Yes, I'll agree it has more comedy than any official Star Trek property would ever have, but the essence of the show, I believe, is week-to-week space exploration that holds a mirror up to society. That's why The Orville is my modern Star Trek. One of my favorite episodes is from Season 1. It's called Majority Rule, It's about the Orville crew exploring a world that is exactly the same as 21st century Earth, with the difference being that it's run by an upvote downvote system where people are punished for social crimes and have to go on an apology tour. If the person gets a certain amount of downvotes from the public, they're lobotomized. I love that the episode looked at the dangers of social media and cancel culture, but it also became a reality in China, minus the lobotomy, when you look at the Chinese social credit system. Some other episodes that do great jobs of showing us new and interesting ideas are episodes like Mad Idolatry, which takes the crew to a planet that ages 700 years every 11 days, where Kelly accidentally starts an entire dedicated religion to herself when she heals one girl in the planet's Bronze Age, or when they travel to a planet where class is determined by the astronomy that you were born under. I feel this show leans into Roddenberry's vision of Star Trek to boldly go where no man has gone before, where New Trek may have forgotten those roots. I also love the show for its interesting in-world politics and factions. Stuff like the Mocklins, the Orville Klingons, threatening to leave the Union and join the enemy Krill because the Orville is protecting a planet of refugee female Mocklins from persecution. By the way, I think one of the great episodes of the show. But since the Mocklins are the leading weapons supplier to the Union and the immediate threat that the Kalons pose, they couldn't risk hurting their relationship more than they have previously, so they had to figure out a diplomatic way to come to a compromise. Although the episode has comedy, I would say that's a pretty big leap from parody. But now to address the comedy, which is the most controversial part because it seems to be the straw that breaks the camel's back. I love it. I think the show is funny in all the right places where some people think it can get in the way of the story or more serious moments. I personally like the show's humor, but I think the best comedy comes from characters playing off each other's personalities. We get to see these people become closer to each other and expand their interpersonal relationships, all the while having an easygoing, fun time. Like when Bortus, the ship's Mocklin, doesn't want to share his birthday and subsequently his birthday cake with Kelly, or when Malloy teaches Isaac about practical jokes after watching Seinfeld. On a side note, a specific reason I love the Orville is because it gets to make references and play music that would never be in Star Trek. It has the freedom to have fun. Stuff like that reminds me of some of the reasons I love The Next Generation. Just scenes where characters sit down and laugh, like when Riker taught Data how to play poker. But when I'm not expecting Star Trek to stop taking itself seriously and become the Orville, which it doesn't need to be, I really hope someone at CBS is paying attention to it. It's the stuff that modern Trek omits that the Orville picks up and runs with, like brightly lit bridges and other sets, likable characters who aren't obnoxious when they're angry, week-to-week exploration of planets, characters or moral decisions that don't have to connect with the previous episode, ever-expanding, interesting lore, a ship's crew that acts like family and cares about each other, and something I think the new Trek shows have lost altogether: family friendliness. When did Star Trek become a for mature audience only? I know the Orville isn't completely G-rated, but it's pretty family-friendly. You can explore dark material without having to constantly curse. I'm not trying to sound like an uptight censor freak, but every time they say fuck on Discovery or Picard, it sounds so forced and out of place. Man, I so agree. It's also lame. It is so stupid and... don't get me started. I know when Logan came out, people were worried if Professor X saying fuck would be weird, but it absolutely fucking worked in that movie and felt natural. But in Star Trek, it just sounds awkward and wrong. Well, kind of like all of modern Star Trek. Awkward and wrong is exactly what I would call it. To get back to the Orville, the show has one of the best massive space battles I've seen on TV in a long time in Identity Part 2, Season 2's big episode that affected the overarching story in the series. To sum up, I think that new Star Trek should look to the Orville when it comes to how it follows classic Trek and is able to easily transition into modern television. I can't speak for people who work on Star Trek now, but I've heard that the creators of Discovery made statements about how classic Star Trek wouldn't work now, which I think is misguided. Now, after all that fan gushing, I'd like to ask you, Rob, have you seen the Orville? Do you have an opinion on the show? If you have, does it hold up to actual Star Trek shows new and old? I know you had an interview with one of the executive producers on the show. Were you a fan prior to meeting him? I'm excited for Season 3, but obviously, because everything got delayed, I have no problem with waiting. I just get disheartened when people compare it to Galaxy Quest in tone, which I see as sometimes reaching the heights of The Next Generation. Whatever the case is, I'm relieved that when actual Star Trek shows don't interest me or lose the essence of the brand, the Orville is there to pick up where the old shows left off and boldly go where no one has gone before. Alex Pollock. Well, Alex, what a fantastic letter. And as Alex mentioned, yes, David Goodman, who is one of the executive producers and a writer of The Orville, I interviewed a couple days ago. I will be dropping that 2-hour interview about his entire career this coming week. He's also the president of the Writers Guild of America. So it is a fascinating interview. And I think anybody who's interested in The Orville or writing or a career in Hollywood will benefit from watching this interview. And I want to say thank you to him for doing that, because it's pretty dope, if I do say so myself. And now let me jump ahead into some super chats and things like that. Sadhu's Screening Room. By the way, Sadhu wrote a great letter yesterday. Couldn't catch the show live. COVID-19 has made school tricky, but I love that you love my letter. I loved your letter. It was great. It was definitely something I had to get out. Also watched your Brian Fuller video. Absolutely love the sound design in Hannibal. Creepiest xylophones ever. Well, thank you for that, Sadhu. Star Wars Rock sends in a tip and says, "Hi, Rob. Do you think that Disney will ever buy Warner Brothers so they have the DC Comics catalog too? And if they do you think that the DC superhero films will become overrun with social justice warrior narrative?" I don't think Disney's ever going to buy Warner Brothers. Warner Brothers is owned by a whole different corporation. I don't think that's ever going to happen. And look, here's my thoughts on the whole idea of social justice warrior narratives. Star Trek has always been interested, and comic books have always been interested in social justice, helping the downtrodden, helping the people that couldn't help themselves. And the fact is, we live in a time where more creators than ever before are jumping into the fray. People of color, women, LGBTQ people, people who have been marginalized and who didn't have a voice before. So they're all jumping into the fray, and everybody is telling their stories for the first time. Now, right now, there's an overcompensation happening, where now that everybody gets to tell their stories, they're making their downtrodden voices or their not heard voices the focus of the stories they're telling. Unfortunately, I don't think that agenda-based storytelling works. Storytelling should be universal. And if you want to have an agenda, you have to bake that into your characters and your stories. You can't lead with your agenda. That's the problem, is that storytelling, the Burnett axiom. Well, the Burnett axiom began as never put your universe before your stories or your characters, because your universe will grow around great stories and great characters. That's what happens. You start telling stories about 3 dudes, maybe named Kirk, Spock, and McCoy, and all of the details around them suddenly create and coalesce. All those details become the universe. But at the core of your storytelling, it's still your characters, like Kirk, Spock, and McCoy. It looks like my stream is just cut out, even though it says I still have an excellent connection. Nope, maybe not. There it is. But so what we're doing is there's kind of a course correction happening, and that course correction is all about getting the voices out that we haven't heard them. So what we're doing now is we're living through a time of, let's call it, it's a sea change. But ultimately, great stories and great characters will always, as they do, win out. Because agenda-based storytelling, it's not usually very good. And stories have to be good in order to endure. So that's kind of how I think about it. Cardinal Sin sends in a super chat and says, "Hey, Laser Bob." You know what they did to Laser Bob? The 7 Faces of Dr. Lau is available to rent on Amazon. Here, this covers the rental and the popcorn. Please watch it with Elizabeth. It's the bomb. Well, thank you, Cardinal Sin. I will indeed check out that. I've watched it before, just so you know. But it's been quite some time. Let's see. I have another letter. Let's see. Oh, that letter I've already read. So here's another. Our friend Omar94 is here, ladies and gentlemen. Hi, Rob. Since you and Elizabeth discussed The Long Kiss Goodnight, written by Shane Black, I want to know what your thoughts are on the Lethal Weapon film series since Shane Black created it. I really like 1 and 2, especially 2, which I consider the best in the series. I like the action in 3 and 4, but not much else. While I really like the second film and consider it the best in the series, I still would like to see what it would have been like if Shane Black's original script was used. It was darker and had Riggs die in the end, which is why it wasn't used, despite Warner Brothers' Richard Donner and Joel Silver all liking it, as there was interest in doing more sequels and for the film series to do more comedy. Jeffrey Boehm came in and created a new script for the second film after doing some uncredited rewrites for a few scenes in the first film. Black later said it was the best script he ever wrote, but nobody can get it, so none of us can read it, unfortunately. Black said the problem with the second film was that there was too much comedy, and he hates 3 and 4 for completely changing Riggs' character. With the third film, as I mentioned before, I only liked the action. It might have been better if an earlier script was used. Jeffrey Boehm returned to write the script with Mark Robert Kamen and Carrie Fisher being uncredited script doctors. Boehm's original script did not have Leo Getz. Lorna Cole was male, who was just as crazy and lethal as Riggs and Murtaugh's oldest daughter, Rhiann, had an affair. An earlier script is not available, so who knows what that would have been like. Like the third film, I only liked the action in the fourth film. It might have been better if Jeffrey Boehm's script was used, which had Riggs and Murtaugh fighting neo-Nazis planning a terrorist attack. Warner Brothers liked the script, but for unknown reasons, it wasn't used. Boehm's script is not available, so who knows what it's like. Boehm admitted his script was better than the final film, and the problem with the film was that there was no completed script when filming started, as the movie was made in a short period of time since Warner Brothers was struggling and needed a hit. Thanks, and live long and prosper. Well, Omar, I like the first Lethal Weapon. I think the first Lethal Weapon is a great character study. I think it's a really interesting movie. I like Martin Riggs, is a haunted character. And of course, they're dealing with an interesting government agency, Vietnam vets that are smuggling drugs and all that. And everyone has a connection to the plot. And I really liked it. I also love the elements of Murtaugh's family and how Martin Riggs is a broken man, that his wife is dead and he is suicidal, and it's a pretty heady, serious film. And of course, it's got a lot of great action in it and everything. And look, the Lethal Weapon 2 actually begins with over the opening credit, over the Warner Brothers logo. It begins with a dun 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 dun, and then it smash cuts into a car where Riggs is bashing on the top of the car because they're in the middle of a chase. And it announces itself to be a funnier, much more light-hearted movie. I think the interesting thing about the Lethal Weapon series is it goes from being a very serious character study that's dealing with a lot of serious themes, dark themes, to becoming a buddy comedy cop storyline. It's really interesting to watch the show change, or the series change. I like Lethal Weapon 2. I think there's a lot of funny stuff in it. I think it's a pretty good movie. But it's certainly, if Lethal Weapon 1 is here, Lethal Weapon 2 is like here, and then it just goes into, it doesn't even matter what the plot is or who the bad guys are. It's all about just watching the character interplay and all the yucks and the funniness. So it's not exactly the greatest, it's I think as the series goes along, and yeah, I was around Warner Brothers. I was working at Warner Brothers when Lethal Weapon 3 got made, and it was, again, another film that wasn't working with a fully realized script when they went into production, which I've never understood. But when they have release dates and they have to get these movies made and they've got talent deals, sometimes they go off half-cocked, and we wind up with movies like Lethal Weapon 3, which I think is, let's just say, it doesn't serve the franchise as well as it possibly could have. So Lethal Weapon 3 and 4 are deeply compromised works. I think Lethal Weapon 1 and 2 are very legit films. Lethal Weapon 2, not as good as it probably should have been, but what are you going to do? This next letter, let's see. Oh, I think I've read all the letters for today. There was only a few. Oh, no, I haven't. This one comes from Jane Hampshire. And this letter, and Jane says, "Hi there. Come to Cincinnati and use our city in one of your shows. Do you do a lot of location shoots out anywhere near the Midwest? I would encourage you to maybe consider a funny show about life growing up on a farm in the Midwest and then leaving to go to a much larger city to study and work. At some point in the character's life, they realize that they missed the farm life and decide to go back." Well, Jane, that sounds good to me. I've never been to Ohio. Elizabeth is from Ohio, and she talks about the cities in Ohio being great, and I would love to go and visit. I think that's an interesting idea. I worked on, I shouldn't say I did much work on it, but when I was at Warner Brothers, we made Doc Hollywood, which kind of is similar to the idea that you bring up. So, yeah, I think that's not a bad idea at all. Stubble McShave sends in a tip and says, do you think Warner Brothers would damage their relationship with Whedon if they released a completed Snyder Cut? Whedon had his hands tied behind his back by having a short time to bring the project home. Yeah, that is something nobody takes really into consideration about a Snyder Cut. When people do things in Hollywood, there are contracts that are signed that you have to abide by. And there have been interesting, in the last couple of years, there are two different cuts of Days of Future Past. There's the Rogue cut, the one that has Anna Paquin in it, and then there's the original release version that barely has Anna Paquin's character Rogue at all, even though Rogue was a much bigger part of Days of Future Past. And they released on video the Rogue cut. Famously, The Exorcist, the two separate, there was Rennie Harlan's Exorcist 4, and there was Paul Schrader's Exorcist 4. And they were two very different movies. And that's a really interesting, case study also coming from Warner Brothers. And I would love to see, I want to see the Snyder Cut. I do. But there are business considerations that as somebody who works in the business, I know that it's not just as simple as like, let's just release the Snyder Cut. First of all, I don't care what anybody says. There are tens of millions of dollars of work that needs to be done on that cut. Even Zack Snyder himself. I know there's going to be all these people that jump all over me now going, Rob, no, it's not true. No, it is true. And the question is, who's going to pay for that? You know, I would think we've talked about HBO Max releasing that. Honestly, you know what I would do right now with movies not being made and production halted? The Snyder Cut is exactly the kind of thing, if basically what you're dealing with is post-production. You're not on set with a bunch of people, post-production, small teams. The Snyder Cut is the very essence of something that could probably be finished. Again, not knowing and being a post-supervisor myself, I don't know how much time is involved. But let's say you could do a Snyder Cut. What an interesting thing to put into theaters to get people to come back. I mean, if the Snyder Cut costs, let's say it costs $30 million. And you have to make $90 million. Well, if you're going to put it on HBO Max anyway, HBO Max is going to spend $1 billion a year of programming. If you could actually make a Snyder Cut, I think now in this COVID-19 era, it is a perfect time, assuming you could get past whatever the legalities are, because do actors get paid again? It's a separate movie. So do they get paid again? Remember, You can't just do a bunch of work where actors star in a movie and release it again. Do they have to get paid again? What do their contracts say? It's a very weird situation, and it could be a very expensive proposition. So people need to understand that there's legalities just because fans want it. We need Zack Snyder's vision. Well, that could be. I would love to see it too, but does someone's contract say that, hey, if you're going to release this theatrically or release it on, you get bumps, you get salary cap, whatever you get. There's a lot of legal considerations that no one ever talks about when they're like, release the Snyder Cut. Let's have a billboard. Have you thought about those contracts? Have you thought about the contracts actors signed? How much do they get paid if you put that out in movie theaters? How much do they get paid if it comes out on home video? See, here's my problem with a lot of I have another letter to read about fans, by the way, another article I want to touch on. But the problem with a lot of fan culture when they discuss the business of Hollywood is they are talking out of their asses. They know nothing. And this is not to be disparaging of my fellow fans. But you know what? Unless you've worked in the business and you really understand what contracts are like in the business and how much people have to, or what they've negotiated, not what they deserve, you can't certainly make certain changes without addressing people's contracts. And a lot of the time when people are talking about things like the Snyder Cut, unless you know what's in everyone's contracts, this is a very good question. Stubble has asked a really great question. Maybe Joss Whedon's contract says, if I agree to work on this film, this is the only version of Justice League that ever will be released. And if that's in his contract, then Warner Brothers' hands are tied. Unless you go back to Joss Whedon and say, hey, man, fans really want the Snyder Cut. Will you be able to? And he'll say, you know what? You can release the Snyder Cut, but you have to pay me $10 million. I mean, we don't know. We don't know. And so when you're talking about releasing the Snyder Cut, there are legal considerations that people haven't even begun to think about in fan circles because they don't know. And that's not because they're dumb. It's because they don't work in the business and they don't understand what that kind of contract law is. So, look, I would love to see the Snyder Cut. But how are you going to pay for that? What if you have to pay the actors twice? What if every actor in the movie, what if our principals, how much does Gal Gadot get? How much does Ben Affleck get? How much does Henry Cavill get? And Henry Cavill was not served very well by the Justice League movie. So he's going to say, well, my contract does say you have to pay me again, but this is an unusual experience, so I want to get twice my salary. You just don't know. I'm not saying that's what he's saying. I have no knowledge of what the contracts are. I've never seen contracts. I know nothing about the contracts of Justice League. I have no idea. But as a producer myself, I have been on the end of negotiating contracts like that, and that has to be taken into consideration. It has to be, but nobody is. Nobody is. I want to see the Snyder Cut. I think it's ridiculous that fans are clamoring for a Snyder Cut without knowing the legalities or how much money is involved. Because it's not as simple as just, oh, it's already finished. It doesn't matter. It could be finished, but you've got contracts with a lot of people that are going to have to get paid again. And who wants to pay them? Is there the will to pay them? How much money can get paid back? That's what it all comes down to. It's all about money and it's all about contracts. So I desperately would love to see a copy of the Snyder Cut. I hated Justice League. I want to see a Justice League movie my whole life. I was so disappointed by it. And you know what? Joss Whedon was between a rock and a hard place. And by the way, I blame not Joss Whedon. I blame the studio. At that point, the studio was floundering. They didn't know what they wanted. They were interfering with filmmakers. They were second-guessing everybody. And if they just allowed the filmmakers that they hired, that they believed in the first place, let the filmmakers do their jobs. When it comes down to whether you're going to pick a filmmaker's vision of the film or you're going to have the studio executives go in and meddle, what the fuck do studio executives know about making movies? Unless they've made movies, then okay, but they don't know. They're following trends. No one gets really successful in Hollywood following a trend. Everybody in Hollywood gets rich setting trends. That's always been the case. Go back into Hollywood history. It's always true. Always true. David Catone sends in a super chat and says, 2001 A Space Odyssey and 2010, the year they make Contact, were made into films. Do you think another film will be made in the near future? Listen, I love 2061. To be honest, Keir Dullea is still alive. I would remake 2010. I think of all the movies right now that should be remade, remake 2010. Remake 2010 and make the book where the Russians and the Americans team up to beat the Chinese. That was the original book. Peter Hyams, the biggest mistake he made, and I'm a 2010 fan. I love 2010. Love it. I love Helen Mirren. I love Roy Scheider. I love Bob Balaban. I love John Lithgow. I love 2010. Does it stand in the shadow of 2001? Sure. Does it come close to 2001? Not at all. But as a space adventure, it's thoughtful, it's intelligent, it's well acted, it's well made. I love 2010. That said, I'd fucking remake that shit in a hot minute. Any executives out there, go read Arthur C. Clarke's 2010 and think to yourself now about what a dope remake that would make. You got Keir Dullea who can come back and still play. He can still play Dave Bowman. You bring him back, and you remake the whole movie. It'd be dope. Hell, you could even keep I might redesign the Leonov, but the Discovery, come on. Remake 2010, go back into the book. Let's see Dave Bowman, careening through the Jovian clouds and seeing the crazy creatures and all. I'd love to see that. And then you make 2061 and then 3001, The Final Odyssey. Let's hope Denis Villeneuve's Dune makes money. Somebody should get on that shit. Man, you know what? If no one else is going to do it, I know I made one movie 20 years ago. I will step up to the plate. As a matter of fact, I'll direct it for pennies on the dollar. I would love to remake 2010. Hell, let me produce it. Let me produce it as long as I could oversee the content. Let me produce it. I'd love to make a 2010 remake. My God, remake the book. And you know what you call it? I don't know. You call it 2050. And then you do 2061 and then do 3001. That's what I would do. So, David Catone, hell yeah. Let's get on that, son. Alexander Wilson's here. He says, do you know what entity that helped being upon the urban renewal renaissance in 1995? It was in L.A., and it was owned by what is now AMC. It was a joint venture of sports and movies. Do I know what entity? All I can think about is Magic Johnson's Theaters? I don't know. Urban Renewal Renaissance in 95. It was in LA and was owned by what is now AMC. All I can think about, I don't know. I know that Magic Johnson Theaters, I can only think of sports and movies. But other than that, I do not know, Alexander Wilson. I do not know the answer to that. Dan V sends in a tip and says, my problem with the Snyder Cut being released is that it feels like it's rewarding bad behavior from a segment of fans. The Harley Quinn show just made fun of Snyder Cut supporters where it was pretty funny. I would still watch it, though. Look, I would love to see the Snyder Cut. I would love to see it. But, again, Dan V says, Whedon redoing a movie in 8 months was an impossible task. I don't see Warner Brothers putting out a 3.5-hour cut in theaters either. If it was released right now, then everyone would have a hard time with unfinished VFX, which are hard to watch. Dan, you're absolutely right. People who don't work in the business, they all say, oh, no, it's okay. We would watch it without unfinished effects. No, you wouldn't. You would bump on all of those. Everybody always says that, even when you're making movies. Trust me, as somebody who's edited a lot of low-budget features, I know most of you haven't seen anything I've worked on. I know. 2 of my favorite things I edited are still sitting on shelves, and no one's ever seen them. One of them's 20 years old, a movie called Dean Quixote, which I really love, that was directed by Orion Walker, who's won awards for being a huge video game writer now. It was his David Lynch homage. I love this movie. I would love to see it get released. And it was held up because Guided by Voices, the band in the movie's new management, said you can't release this anymore, even though they're in the movie. But anyway, I digress. But yeah, I think, man, if you finished a 3.5-hour cut of Justice League, you market to the fanboys, just like, and the fangirls, and the fan old men like myself. I would pre-order my tickets right now. I would jump all over that. A 3.5-hour Justice League movie, bring that shit on, as John Schnepp would say. Bring that shit on, son. I mean, we would jump all over that. Everybody would jump all over that. The problem with the fan community with this is that the fan community doesn't understand the actual realities of production, meaning legalities as well. And I appreciate everyone's enthusiasm. I love that they want it. I want it. But the realities of actual production and the money involved and how do you recoup, if you cannot spend the money on the Snyder Cut unless you can recoup that money. Period. It ain't show friends, it's show business. It's not show fans, it's show business. So, tell Warner Brothers, I wish the people that want to do the release of the Snyder Cut, they would go in, hire the right people, find out, let them make a post-production budget. Literally, if the release the Snyder Cut people, if you got some people that were involved, like get people on the inside to actually come up with that actual post-production budget, like a real budget. I'm talking about a real line item budget, and say, okay, it's going to cost $27,898,404. That's how much it's going to cost, and you have a line item budget. Let the release the Snyder Cut people come up with that, and then they have exactly how they're going to recoup that money and where that money is going to come from. Because somebody's going to have to do that. What the release the Snyder Cut people are asking for is just that very thing. And they don't get it. They think, studios just have money. They can just spend this. They cannot. They're making a product. And if you don't know, why am I ranting? I shouldn't be. Let me take a sip of water and calm myself down. Much better. I should be day drinking. I have no whiskey. I haven't had whiskey in weeks. Anyway, that's all. Until the release, the Snyder Cut people actually are serious. And when I say serious, it's not that they're serious that they don't want their movie released, but they have to start thinking, how do you actually make it happen? How do you budget it out? And how do you get a return on that investment? No one's asking that question. Felix Leiter is here, and he sends in a tip, and he says, "Oh, great emperor of existentialism, outside of the Bond movies, I'm wondering what your favorite Connery performance is. Mine is Entrapment. Other than Hunt for Red October or Zardoz, what do you suggest?" You know what? I really like it. Philip Kaufman directed it. It's an adaptation of a Michael Crichton book, Rising Sun. I think, first of all, Entrapment's great. I really like Entrapment, but I really like Connery in Rising Sun. It's not a great movie, and it's pretty dated now, and it is. Look, maybe the book is a little racist toward the Japanese, but remember when it was written back in the day, everyone's afraid, oh, the Japanese corporations are buying up America. But I think Connery is really, really good in that movie. But yeah, you know, I enjoy Connery in that film. Isn't he in like The Longest Day too? But yeah, I think that's a good Connery role. And of course, you didn't mention it, but The Untouchables. You've got to watch The Untouchables. There's a Connery performance for you. And also Outland. I mean, I understand it's a riff on High Noon. I get it. But Outland, pretty dope. Pretty dope, Felix. Check those out. Now, there was another article that I was going to read, and I have to find it. Here it is. It's pretty extensive, but I found it, and it's called Fandom and Participatory Culture. And that's not the right article. This is the article. Fandom and Participatory Culture. And I just want to read a little bit of it. It's much more academic, and it comes from a website. I don't even know what website it is. Some crazy website. But anyway, again, cursory Google searches, you can find anything. But I just thought I would read a little bit about this. Fandom and Participatory Culture. Fan culture, or fandom, is a term which describes communities built around a shared enjoyment of an aspect of popular culture, such as books, movies, TV shows, bands, sports teams, etc. Fan cultures are example of participatory cultures. Participatory cultures involve fans acting not only as consumers, but also as producers and creators of some form of creative media. Through most fan cultures, including sports fans and fans of music groups, have elements of participatory culture. Media fandom in particular encourages creative expression and artistic production by its participants. Jenkins et al. 2009 defined a participatory culture more specifically as one that consists of 1. Relatively low barriers to artistic expression and civic engagement. 2. Strong support for creating and sharing one's creations with others. 3. Some type of informal mentorship in which the most experienced members pass along their knowledge to novices. 4. Members who believe their contributions matter. 5. Members who feel some degree of social connection with one another and care about other members' opinions and their contributions. In fan culture, these creations and artistic expressions take the form of fan fiction, fan art, fan videos, cosplay, folk songs, and other interactions with a person, group, or fictional universe. Fan fiction consists of stories written by fans of a particular work of fiction, rather than the original creator, about the fictional characters or universe. Fan videos or fan vids or fan films set clips of a movie or TV show to music and or construct a narrative using clips from multiple source materials, or they're movies made out of whole cloth. Folk songs are a type of folk music, usually with science fiction, fantasy, or other fictional universes as a subject. Cosplay is the practice of wearing costumes or other clothing and accessories in an attempt to portray a fictional character. Modern fan culture originated with Star Trek fandom in the 60s. I would say in the 70s, but okay. At the time, fans generally spread their creations through fanzines or conventions. Recently, the internet has allowed fan culture to become more widespread and more accessible. Rather than submitting a work of fan fiction to a zine where, if accepted, it would be photocopied along with other works and sent out to a mailing list, modern fans post their work online. Media scholar Henry Jenkins contrasts participatory culture with consumer culture, suggesting that fans poach from popular media, appropriating ideas from the text and rereading them in creative ways for their own uses. One theory of popular culture holds that corporate culture industry, media producers such as TV networks and film studios, prioritizes profit at the expense of quality, and that pop culture is a form of hegemony, used to spread dominant ideologies. However, the theory of participatory culture suggests that rather than being cultural dupes, social misfits, and mindless consumers, media fans can be understood as active producers and manipulators of meaning. fan interaction with media becomes a social activity, and this process allows fans to build their own communities, like the Post-Geek Singularity, in which they can express themselves. In doing so, they create spaces where they can critique prescriptive ideas of gender, sexuality, and other norms promoted in part by the media industry. Jenkins also theorizes that participatory culture can be a form of resistance. For example, fan fiction, fan videos, and folk songs often explore themes and aspects of the source material which are of interest to the female-dominated parts of the fan community, going beyond the stories in the male-dominated media industry is interested in or willing to tell. He suggests that fandom's very existence represents a critique of conventional forms of consumer culture, while also providing a space within which fans may articulate their specific concerns about sexuality, gender, racism, colonialism, militarism, and forced conformity. Not only do fans generate their own creative material, but they often do so in ways which critique the media they are consuming. And then here's an interesting chart. Geek hierarchies. It sounds like I'm Jordan Peterson in the intellectual dark web. Social hierarchies exist between and within fan cultures, which leads to judgment. Members of any subgroup tend to have a general consensus regarding which behaviors are acceptable, i.e., which behaviors constitute true fans or desperate overconformers. This dynamic is represented in the geek hierarchy. While members benefit themselves by displaying commitment, too strong an investment in threatening even as they very affect is what centrally defines fans and geeks. Pardon me, let me read that again. While members benefit themselves by displaying commitment, quote, too strong an investment is threatening, even as that very affect is what centrally defines fans and geeks. For example, a Star Trek fan who goes to a fan convention might consider herself more geeky than someone whose involvement with the show ends at watching it, but less geeky than another Star Trek fan who speaks Klingon. Defining a place for oneself in fan culture depends on navigating the fine line between professionalism, consumerism, expertise, and commitment. Fandom and identity. Participation in fan culture is often gendered, and a given fan's activity's place in internal hierarchies is often correlated to the gender of the participants. For example, the vast majority of fan fiction writers are women. Generally, transformative activities, such as creating fan fiction, fan art, fan vids, etc., are associated with female fans. Conversely, curative or affirmational activities, such as memorizing trivia or collecting merchandise, tend to be associated with male fans. Though the two types of fan activity are not mutually exclusive, and though people of all genders engage in any given form of activity, the gendered stereotypes associated with each type of fandom is reflected in whether those who engage in those activities are treated as serious fans. Henry Jenkins writes that the, quote, largely female composition of media fandom reflects a historical split within the science fiction fan community between the traditionally male-dominated female fans. Fan fiction often brings female experiences into source texts, which are generally... In her article on geek hierarchies and gendering, Christina Boos delves further, or maybe it's Bousset or Bousset, delves further into how gender informs the perceptions of a particular fan behavior. Not only do certain branches of the subcultures, such as those engaged in fan fiction, become coded unfavorably towards a particular gender, but the way in which media depicts female fans casts them in a disparate and disgraceful light. Bousset describes how the television program Supernatural, whose fan base is primarily female, don't tell John Campea I just said that, this depicts gender bias in its representation of a particular, as in this mean-spirited and hate that of a fangirl. I see that, I don't know. Right now I can see that this stream is zigging and zagging. Well, it seems good now. I don't know. Well, let's see. I can continue to go on. This mean-spirited and hateful representation of female fans seems strange, and yet it suggests the intended viewer's subject position is clearly not that of a fangirl. According to Sarah Gatson and Robin Reed, the default fanboy has presumed race, class, and sexuality. White, middle class, male heterosexual. This stereotyped and often untrue profile of fandom participants is applied to many fandoms, such as the brony fandom, voluntarily choose to lower their social status by participating in fandoms. I don't think that's true, but okay. Mel Stanfill, in his article Doing Fandom, Misdoing Whiteness, Heteronormativity, Racialization, and the Discursive Construction of Fandom, argues that one of the qualities of fandom participation is that it is constructed as ultimately correctable. The notion of needing to grow up is very present in our society, and this is one lens with which society often uses to view participants of fandom. They simply need to grow up. Damn it. Is that all? Maybe I would have been. Who knows? Therefore, especially amongst white participants, fandom is viewed as a safe way to experiment with a new identity while still having the opportunity to return to the white norms from which they had deviated. What a bunch of academic hooey this is. But whatever. Stanfill further states that the overall trend of fans being portrayed as white in popular culture, I'm looking at you, Big Bang Theory, serves to reinforce that whiteness is the expectation for fans. The stereotype of fans as white males is frequently inaccurate. In many fandoms, women rather than men make up the majority of fans, such as in the Twilight or Hunger Games fandoms, unless you're Dieter Bastian in Germany, where we know he is a raging white male Hunger Games fan. In addition, women often make up the majority of transformative work-centered subsets of fans, even for media aimed at men. For instance, women were the primary drivers of the early Star Trek fandom, which is generally considered to be the first modern media fandom. Indeed, women were the people that threw the first convention. Similarly, many people of color do participate in fandom. However, except in cases where the original source material is non-Western, the existence and contribution of fans of color are often less recognized than those of their white counterparts. In his work on fan and participatory culture, Matt Hills examines the interplay between production and the consumerism that fan cultures criticize. Although fandom has generally bifurcated its participants into a moral dualism of good fandom versus bad consumption, Hills argues for less divided classification of fan culture. Furthermore, by the way, he wrote that in 2002. Things have changed. Furthermore, several different fan cultures have turned those who subscribe to traditional workings of capitalism into the other. People who buy too many items automatically lose authenticity by contributing to structures that align too strongly with dominant capitalist society, therefore alienating themselves from supposedly committed fans. Conversely, we are presented with the view of fans as specialist consumers whose fandom is expressed through keeping up with the new release of books, comics, and videos. I don't know anyone like that. Therefore, fans must perpetually occupy a space in which they carve out their own unique identity, separate from conventional consumerism, but also bolster their credibility with particular collector's items. Anyway, I could go on and on and on, but you know what? This is, again, an interesting article I found that I thought was sort of interesting. But here's a link to the article if you want to read more. I have to say that, I had it and then I screwed it up. I have to say I'm always interested to read academic analysis of fan culture because it's strange to me. Like when I became a fan, I was just me. I liked this cool shit and I wanted to know more about it. I didn't care about what I belonged to. There wasn't a fan community. I had no fan community. It was just me. You know, and so I might have been, drooling over my Enterprise blueprints that were spread out around me on the floor of my bedroom. You know, my mom would walk in, "What are you doing in here?" I'm like, "Well, Mom, I'm trying to figure out which deck the Enterprise bowling alley is on," which I'm sure my mom found strange, but it was probably better than what she expected to find me doing alone in my room with the door shut, if you know what I'm saying. Well, let's face it, I was doing that too. So, anyway, so you can check out that article. I thought it was somewhat interesting. So there you go. Alexander Wilson is back. Magic begged him to come see it in person. The CEO of Lowe's said that when the night was over "We may have something here." That one venture by Magic Johnson helped bring theaters and development to urban cities. In D.C., there were only 2 theaters in the 90s. So I guess I was right. Look, I remember when the Magic Johnson theaters opened. I actually went. What did I go see? I went and saw. I don't know if it was a Child's Play movie. I went and saw specifically because, as Alexander, I'll tell you, in Seattle, I used to love when a Friday the 13th movie would open specifically. I would specifically go and watch it with, let's call it, an urban audience, because, and I've talked about this before on the show, I liked seeing a horror movie like Friday the 13th with a predominantly black audience. And before people start screaming, oh, you're racist. No. There's a participatory nature. And I didn't understand. I'm like, where did this come from? And what was so funny was people were really witty and funny, and they would talk back to the screen. They talk to the characters like, don't go in there or whatever. And I didn't understand it until I was in college when I was taking a program called The Making of Meaning, and we actually went to a church, like a Southern Baptist, predominantly black church. And that's when I had this revelation. I was like, oh, the church experience for if you go to a predominantly black church, it's very participatory. There's the preacher, and you call back. You talk to the preacher. You go to a white church, at least where I was growing up, nobody said shit. You'd stand and you'd listen. Maybe you'd get an amen if it was more of a Pentecostal church, but people are just quiet. And that participatory nature in like, say, a black church, that's the experience that I would get going to see movies like that. And that's why I went to a Magic Johnson theater. I thought it was awesome. And it's just, again, a cultural difference that once you understand it, it's like, well, that's cool. And that's why I love going to see Friday the 13th movies. When you go, I remember seeing Friday the 13th Part 2 at the John Dance Cinema in Bellevue. And that was the last time I went. It was so boring. I mean, we were the ones screaming because we had seen the cover of Fangoria where you saw Mrs. Voorhees' head in the refrigerator. It was the cover on Fangoria. And we actually screamed out, don't open the fridge. Nobody laughed. It was not fun. And then we were all just sitting there like this. Never again. Friday the 13th Part 3 at the Town Cinema in downtown Seattle might be the greatest movie-going experience of my entire life. It was amazing. Amazing. But yes, so what Magic Johnson did was, and when it happened here, it was great. That's interesting, though. That's really interesting. That one venture by Magic Johnson helped bring theaters and developments to urban cities. In D.C., there were only two theaters in the 90s. That's crazy. Well, that was an amazing... Look, that's an amazing example of an entrepreneur who knew something about a marketplace that was untapped and created something that was amazing. And I didn't realize it really spread. I never thought of it spreading beyond the Los Angeles. I can't wait. Is this part of that documentary? I thought that everyone saw the Michael Jordan documentary. I don't know, but I have to go watch this. I mean, I think that's amazing. So I'm down, man. I want to see this. Where is that? Is that an article? The night was over. We may have something here. That's really interesting. But that's the thing. I mean, that's why I always say every person you meet has a story to tell you have yet to hear, because we're all myopic. We're all looking at our own worlds. And if we just step out of our daily experiences and you go and try and find out someone else's experience or find out what it is, you suddenly come across things like, well, okay, I can open a movie theater here. And suddenly I didn't even think about opening a movie theater in this part of town. But yeah, that's why every person you meet has a story to tell you have yet to hear. And all you have to do is listen. I wish we would do more of that. Think about how many more entrepreneurial businesses, how much more success we could see across the board if people just listen to each other. And we're like, oh, that's a good idea. But you can't just listen to each other. You have to truly understand. Listening is only the beginning of understanding. Then you have to really think about it and contemplate it and figure all that shit out. So anyway, ladies and gentlemen, I am going to bring an end to Robservations episode number 405. This is a very interesting show, I thought. I hope you all enjoy it. I hope you all did enjoy it. Again, I will be dropping the Bill Sienkiewicz interview and also the WGA president and Orville executive producer David Goodman interviews in the next couple of days on the Burnettwork. I've been really happy to see the response from everybody who has loved the Brian Fuller interview, who loved the Carrie David interview, the Melinda Snodgrass interview, and the Barbara Crampton interview I did for the 400th, and dropping those as individual episodes with the full interviews. It's been very gratifying to read your comments, so I appreciate that. You know, if there's other things you want me to do, like other interviews you want me to get or people you'd like to have I could go after and bring on the show, I'm completely open to that. Because I think it's what the channel needs, and I'd like to diversify. I mean, after 400 episodes of me yammering away, it's nice to have a different perspective. And also, I'm thinking about the fact that my birthday is May 15th, and I'm thinking about doing a Zoom birthday, where I don't know if it's true you can get like 300 people up to, but having a Zoom birthday party where I'll do the show because I'll give away the giveaway for the JBL, the Barn 9.1, but it'll be interesting if I can do that, set up like a little, like a couple hours where all of us will go into a Zoom chat and we can just all talk and meet one another face to face. I'd love to hear if you want to do it. I mean, a lot of people don't want to be on camera. I don't know how well that would work. And I know Zoom's getting hacked, so somebody might, in the middle of it, send dick pics or something. We can rate them if we get them. I have no problem with that. But I think it'd be fun. I don't know if you guys would be into it, but it's something that we definitely could do. I think it'd be kind of neat. We shall see. Let's see. I don't want to. Oh well, you know what? Alexander Wilson also, he did say yes. The answer is the former Magic Johnson Theater in L.A. The CEO of Lowe's, who owned the theater, told Magic that you can't make money in urban areas. Magic told him, if you build it, they will come. The CEO went to the opening and saw the success. Magic begged him to come see it in person. The CEO of Lowe's said, when the night was over, we may have something here. That one venture by Magic Johnson helped bring theaters and development to urban cities. In D.C., there were only 2 theaters in the 90s. Sorry, I missed that, Alexander. That is unbelievable. And again, look at what Magic Johnson, in addition to being Magic Johnson, and he did bring magic to the basketball court, but he was also an entrepreneur that could only, coming out of his own community, saw an underserved portion of the community and created a business that didn't exist because other people couldn't have seen it. Well, traditionally, these kinds of movie theaters don't succeed in more urban environments. Yes, they do. I saw that when I saw Friday the 13th Part 3D. Are you kidding me? I mean, it's like saying, what, you think some certain ethnic group doesn't like movies? Everybody likes movies. Everybody likes movies. People love movies. And it's a great story, man. That's a great story, Alexander. I'm glad you brought that up. Because come on, man. I mean, everybody likes movies. Once we start thinking of all of humanity as the human race, as opposed to, like, why do we think that, I mean, I get it, but why do we think that different colored people, if somebody has more melanin in their skin or certain physical characteristics because of where they grew up, where they're genetically from on this planet, we're still all part of the human race. We can all procreate together. We're all part of the human race. Why don't people start thinking that way? I wish they would, man. Maybe one day. Maybe one day. I don't know. Stubble McShave says, I saw a documentary about all the problems with the Wizard of Oz production. 5 directors, asbestos for snow, witch's face burned by special effects. The lion's clothes were real lion skin. 90 pounds and warm stage made him drenched with sweat. Also, the trivia page on the IMDb is long. Cardinal Sin sends in a super chat and says, Rob, your birthday is the same day as Doomcock's. Yeah, but I had my birthday first. Although, I got to tell you, maybe Doomcock and I could, I've never spoken to him. I think I've been on, I don't know if I've been on a one chat with him for a long time, but I should team up with Doomcock. Doomcock and I should do a show on our birthday. Maybe I could have him on this show. I don't know. I think it'd be fun. I like Doomcock's videos. I watch Doomcock. Sometimes we park our shuttlecrafts in the same garage. So maybe I'll reach out to him because that'd be fun. I'd love to team up on our birthdays. We're the bulls in the china shop. We're the Tauruses in the china shop. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to bring an end to Robservations episode 405. I want to thank my moderating staff. I want to thank, of course, Mike Bodden, the mayor of Riverdale, Iowa. I want to thank Detective Jim Boyers and his wife Heidi for being awesome. I hope Heidi's feeling better. It's a Sunday. I want to imagine them sitting out in their backyard drinking sweet tea or something stronger and just having a good time. I want to thank Greg Smith. I want to thank Louis Yu. I want to thank Jordy Lyons. I want to thank the Richard. Of course, the Richard for moderating the Whining About Movies and the Post-Geek Singularity Facebook page and being in the chats and all that. And also, I want to remind everybody that tomorrow on Elizaviews, Whining About Movies, we are going to be watching David Lynch's The Elephant Man. The Elephant Man. So check that out. And also remember, you can enter the giveaway. We are giving away, once again, a JBL Bar 9.1, which is amazing. Look at that subwoofer. It's kicking. It's fun. All you have to do is go into the description below and find the link and go through the link, and you can enter. And we're going to give that away on my birthday, amongst many other things. So it should be fun. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to bring an end to episode number 405 of Robservations, show about something. And remember, every person you meet has a story to tell you have yet to hear. And all you have to do is listen. And with that, I say, have a better day. And I mean that.